Mr. Evolution 777.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brett Keene. Whenever I was younger, my mother got sick, and I ended up having to be taken away by the state. I was basically put in this thing called Valley Springs Youth Ranch, which can actually be found on the internet. It was closed down for a long time, but it ended up getting put up a few years ago. I discovered this because I wanted to see what the future of the youth ranch was. The place was meant for juveniles as well as kids that didn't have a home to go to. It wasn't expected that my mother would get any better at the time, so this is where I had to stay. They didn't have any foster homes at that moment in order to put me in, so I needed a bed somewhere. Well, what ended up happening was it was heavily religious. It was kind of like a little bit like what you see on these videos of Jesus Camp and everything like that. It was basically covered in Christians who wanted to teach the Bible to young people and talk about that kind of stuff. So that's where I went. Well, let me describe a little bit of what the place was like before I get into the story of what had happened. The place was basically had tons and tons of acres of land where there were cottages where a certain amount of juveniles or people who were living there who didn't have parents or whatever the case might be were staying in. So what ended up happening was at certain times of the day, whenever it was time, people would all file into like a cafeteria where they would eat. They would do their food, pick up their trays, and go sit down, kind of like a lunch cafeteria in a high school. Well, what happened was that one day we were sitting in the cafeteria eating, and some teenagers were brought in. Between 14 and 16 years old. If you were 17, then you were legal according to the state to be able to leave and do what you need to, unless the state decided to keep you until you were 21. It was whatever the decision of the state or whatever your case might be. So what ended up happening, ladies and gentlemen, is that one of the counselors up there, this kind of redneckish type of guy who was heavily into Christianity, heavily into the church, decided to bring these three teenagers forward in front of the entire cafeteria in a means to humiliate them and discuss the Bible. Apparently the teenagers had been there for a long time at Valley Springs, and they hadn't really interacted with females because there wasn't any girls that were on the campus type deal, the youth ranch. So it turned out that apparently they had went up into the woods and decided that they wanted to basically give each other head and fuck with each other sexually because they had no one else to do it on. And they were caught doing it. So these teenagers, these kids were basically brought down into the cafeteria. And the guy, the counselor who had brought them forward, opened up his Bible and started reading verses out of it about homosexuality and how it's an abomination and how these kids are disgusting pieces of garbage for partaking in homosexual acts up in the woods. What ended up happening after all this humiliation and embarrassing insults and all these kids watching, it got a little bit more horrifying than that. The guy instructed in the cold of winter to have these kids taken outside, and there was a pretty big sized lake that wasn't completely frozen over just yet, and he asked for the kids to throw the kids that were caught doing homosexuality into the cold ass lake. So this was done. Two of them allowed themselves to be picked up and thrown in the water, but one of them fought. And during that struggle and that fight, he was kind of thrown awkwardly and didn't go completely all the way into the water, but ended up hitting the shallow end of the ground where the water lay. This injured the kid, almost completely knocked him unconscious. And I remember, as young as I was, I didn't know what to think of all this. I believed in the Bible at the time, and I believed that God was the truth and all that kind of shit. But I also felt like what was going on was wrong, what was going on was bad. But I chose not to do anything about the situation. I didn't step up. I didn't say a word. So what ended up happening was, as they realized, hold on a second, I got a fucking dog over here barking. Be right with you. Basically what happened is that the kid was injured. And some of the other counselors, they came out and they asked that the kid be taken to a hospital. But they began debating and everything because this youth ranch was actually like super far out into the wilderness and stuff. If you were to do a Google search and stuff, you'll find out that it was way out in Black Missouri, Ironton, which is several miles away from any kind of hospitals or anything like this. So, it's hot in here. I expected to be doing my video out in the fucking cold before the dog came. But what ended up happening, ladies and gentlemen, is that this the asshole that fucking originally instructed for them to toss this kid in the water, he basically threw the kid in the back of his pickup truck. Not in the passenger side, but in the pickup truck. And remember, it was the cold of winter. He drove off, and after that, I never seen the kid again. I never seen the kid. I don't know if the kid got taken to the hospital. I don't know what happened. But what ended up happening for me is I had stood there. I didn't say a fucking word whenever that situation happened. About 2-3 months down the line and stuff of this situation happening prior, I ended up getting into a confrontation with another kid up there. The kid, me and him got into an argument over a situation. It's not really important what the argument was over, but the kid decided that he wanted to take a handful of pencils and pens that he had in his hand and approached me, and he ended up stabbing me right in the head, kind of like what you would call shanking, like in that of a prison. So after I got stabbed, the counselors were not interested or willing to take me to the doctor or the hospital. So through all that, after I started to get a little sicker and it was starting to do damage to me, I decided that I needed to get the fuck away from this place, and I ended up running from this youth ranch. I'd say, after about 3 days of walking through the cold and shit, having really no place to sleep or anything like that, I ended up being picked up by a police officer, which I told the officer, the police officer, the story about what had happened to myself, showed him the wound on my head, also told him about what happened with the kid, and I found myself 3 days later basically getting ready to go to court, where I ended up telling everybody the story of what happened to that kid as well as myself, and I ended up going to the doctor and finally getting some lead taken out of my fucking head as well as some plastic from the pins. If you look on the side of my head, which I may show you guys one day, you'll actually see the scar. It's still there today. Peace out, ladies and gentlemen. That's what happens when you don't do something and you just stand around and don't or try to do anything about a problem, no matter how young you are, no matter how weak you think that you are. Sooner or later, you're going to pretty much get the same fucking treatment. So you might as well help when you can. Peace out.
Now this is showing you the scar that Brett was talking about. See where my thumb is? That line right there, that's the scar. And in regards to where it is on his body, here's his ear, there's the scar. Feel free to post videos to us, whether they're on topic or not. Share your content by attaching it as a video response. Brett and I will be happy to watch, rate, and share your videos. Please don't forget to rate, sub, and favorite our videos as well. This is a community, so let's help each other. Mr. Evolution 777 can be found on MySpace and Facebook. If you enjoyed Brett's church phone calls, lots can be found at Blip TV. All links can be found in the video descriptions for your convenience. Have a great day.